All right, welcome to Coaching in the Shark Tank, where we dive deep into the minds of coaches who inspire athletes and shape the game. I'm your host, Coach Eddie, and today I'm joined by Coach Brooks, who's been coaching youth soccer at the Jacksonville Hammerheads. This man is a living local legend, all right, and a great mentor for not just the boys, but for the other coaches as well. Coach, thanks for jumping into the Shark Tank with us.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the introduction.
So we'll start off simple here and just kind of give us like a little bit of your coaching background, like how you got into it and how long you've been.
Yeah, so, coaching for me, I've been doing it for about 12 years. I had children who wanted to play sports, and they played for a couple teams, and I realized that there was a need for, some coaches who had a little bit more knowledge about the game. So I wanted my players, my kid at that point in time, to have the best opportunity. So I felt like stepping into that role of coaching was the best thing for me at that time. Plus, I just enjoy, being around the youth. It's an outlet for me. As a kid, I've always enjoyed playing sports, and it's kind of a way to get away from other things in life. And, these players, you don't know their backgrounds and so forth. So it's nice to be able to help out, especially the youth.
Yeah, and I can really relate to that because my coaching journey started kind of the same way. My daughter getting into that age where she could finally play, and I was like, hey, I've seen coaches, that didn't always know everything and coaches that knew everything, and I was like, let me at least be involved so that I can start to learn some of the things. So,
yeah.
And then, like you said, coming in with a background of sports, that obviously played a role for you. Because it's always fun to step into something that you at least know a little bit about.
That's right.
So then how would you describe your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, my coaching philosophy, I would have to say is, let the kids learn. And that's nothing new or it's actually something newer for me. The older I've gotten and the more I've coached, I've learned that, you can't always instruct the player exactly what to do, and as a younger coach, you think about things that are not really important, like winning the game. You want to do those things, and over time you realize, it's more about development of the player, not just as a soccer player, but as an overall person, so my development over the years, I've learned to let them play and let them learn, a lot on their own, and asking questions to really, kind of pick their brain and let them think about the answer versus just trying to instruct them and giving them the answer.
Yeah, and I'll let you expand on it too, but like having been able to view a little bit of your practice, that's like very evident with what I've seen, like the drills that you pick and how you design your session, is that there's a lot of like opportunity, I'll say, for the players to make mistakes. Right.
Yeah.
As well as make like great decisions. So there's room for them to grow.
That's right.
And so then if you could just expand a little bit on like what your planning process looks like and how you carry your philosophy over into your training session.
Yeah. My training sessions are geared really to a three-phase session, and that's just kind of something I've learned, I think, from the experts or getting my license. It's good to do a warm-up phase, obviously, get them stretched out. And then you want to kind of work into your core activity there in the center, which will involve a little bit more maybe technical plus a little bit larger field versus the first activity, which might be small-sided games with some stretches. And then finally we move on to the game-like phase where we really open up the pitch and, have it, the field at its, full length and or at least 3/4 of the full length, so that way the players can get that game-like scenario toward the end of training. But as far as them learning and give them the opportunities to make those mistakes, that core activity is really geared to what it is we're working on that week. Whether it's in possession or out of possession, what part of the field we're working on, whether we're looking to create space or to get compact if we're out of possession. But those activities during those 3 sessions, we give the players an opportunity to think for themselves. We try to direct them to the right answer, by maybe following up with a question if they, can't figure it out on their own, or even, ask the other players. But, we stop the play sometimes to give the instruction or to talk about certain things. But really through those 3 phases, we, really work on, the letting them learn from the experience.
Okay. And I think it's interesting talking about your structure that you just demonstrated. We in class we recently just went over the development of technical and tactical skills,
right,
and what that looks like and how we do it. And the big thing that we kept circling on, like the shark in the water coming for that blood, was that it requires structured buildup, and
right,
it can't be randomized. And so for you, was that something that, like, coming into coaching you had a good grasp on, or is that, like, over the years I've figured out that, like, trial by fire?
Yeah, when you first getting started, you're trying to learn, and I looked up videos, talked to other coaches. I really was lucky because I had a veteran coach at the time. He wasn't certified or anything like that, but he's a player who watches nothing but soccer. So he watches it all the time, and he was very experienced in that. So I kind of got lucky with that. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of times, especially when I was in my youth, trying to position the players, what formation, works best, explaining to the players, how to stay connected or to properly be spaced. It did take some time. I think that the longer I coached, the more I understood why the positioning needed to be there, or why the players needed to be in certain spaces or certain areas. And once again, you can't be out there constantly. You try to, or you end up being so much into the game that you're telling them to do this and telling them to do that. But you want them to learn on their own at the same time. So yeah, I mean, it's been a learning experience. It's taken several years to get here. And I was just talking to another coach the other day, and we were talking about how this year, between last year and this year, this is the time, I don't know if it's 12 years in, but it's like I've really learned a lot from the players. Like I'm learning more from the players, I feel like, even than they may be learning from me. And what I mean by that is, I'm learning how to better create the environment for them, to make that development or help that development go to, the fullest extent that it can during the season, with the limited time we have with a player. So...
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna agree with you that it must be something in the air, because I haven't been coaching nearly as long. I'm only entering my 6th year now.
Okay.
But I've seen it already with a lot of that like this team has really kind of, I'll say, challenged me with my preconceptions of going in and like how to coach and how to address certain things, and learning different approaches for different players. It's really been kind of a formative year for me, I'll say.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is like you're saying, there's something going on that everybody's actually getting something.
Right.
So then with that look of your coaching philosophy and your overall style of coaching, how do you find ways to keep players motivated and get them initially motivated?
That's one thing. Again, this year has been the year. It takes. You got to kind of study the players. You talk to them. You don't want to just put them out there and have them, play soccer all the time. You got to get to know the players, on an individual basis. So taking the time to do that and understanding the players is very helpful in being able to relate to them, and how to get the best out of them. I've learned that you can stay away from pointing out the things that the players do wrong, right? Because that's your first instinct. You want to say, hey, you got to take some off that ball. Well, it helps to point out to another, maybe another player and tell them that they are doing a good job of doing what that player is not doing a good job of. So you look at a player, and you go, hey, way to keep the ball down on the ground while the other player is kicking the ball up in the air. And you believe it or not, but, you turn around, look at that player who made the mistake previously, and it works. Everybody starts chiming in and listening, and you say, hey, so-and-so, way to communicate. And then all of a sudden the whole team's like, ball, 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 ball. I'm here, I'm ball. And it's just amazing how that works. That's one thing that I've learned that really works well, especially at this age, probably all ages, I think that works really well.
Yeah, and I've seen that with the little work that I've done this season with the rec team as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a U6 program, and that was something I didn't really think about going in. And then I think Josh mentioned it during one of our training sessions, that instead of correcting the ones that aren't following the order, congratulate the one that is, and then everybody falls in line. And so that's something that I probably need to start recircling and bring back in. Yep. With the U14 boys, because I think that could, like you said, I think that works at every level.
Honestly, you as a coach, right? I'll go to the next training session and I'll start pointing out the things that I see that are mistakes, right? And then it takes that reminder to myself. Oh, you don't want to do that, right? And it just all of a sudden becomes mechanical, and then the next practice, you remember that that's what you should do, and then it works. So. Yeah, sometimes you forget, but, you can always circle back around and say, oh, yeah, So that's worked really well, especially for this age group, being that they're 11, 12-year-olds right there on the verge of, puberty. And it really works well for them. So, and players at that age, they want to hear positive things. They don't, it's not fun to hear your name being called for, making a mistake. So.
Yeah. And so now, like you said, so there's a lot of different approaches for coaching overall, and kind of whittling things out and taking time to actually grow yourself as a coach is a big step in what we do. Now, if you could, this is where, for me, it's a little tricky, right? Like, if we want to look at professional coaches, right? Like, we take Mikel Arteta with Arsenal, or any coach, any club, any country. Like, we can define the good ones from the great ones because of the success of the team. How do you define or separate good coaches from great coaches at the youth level?
So, I don't even think the professional coaches, they weren't always winners. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, at times in their life when they certainly weren't always winners. I believe that about every coach. They've got to have their losing seasons. They got to have, they've got to have, or else they wouldn't be coaching. If they were that great and they just went to a team and the team wins, that. It sounds fine and dandy, but obviously they are putting in a lot of effort, to get there. You look at any coach, and the ones that are successful, and they put forth a lot of time and effort, and you have to, if you want to be successful. That goes for anything, So what separates the good ones from the great ones? It's about continuing on with what you do, as a person. Great coaches, they're going to always push their players. You may think that they're upset or whatever, but they're always going to push their players because they care. They care about their players. They care about the game, and they want to see players to be able to get to their full potential. And as a coach, that's my every time I come to practice or a match, or every time I coach in a team, it's not about winning or losing. Not for me. Is the team, the players, are they getting better? Are they performing? Are they doing things differently as the season goes along in the direction that we're supposed to be going? And that's what to me You don't have to win to be successful, obviously. I think great coaches will not give up. They're going to continue, and they're going to get players to reach their full potential.
And I like that, how you said that, right, is constantly trying to push players to get to their top potential. Because I think when we do look at some of these, like, greatest coaches of all time at the professional level, we have, like, John Wooden from the UCLA Bruins, who had a tremendous track record through his professional career. But his definition of success didn't come from wins and losses. It was knowing that in the moment we gave everything that we could.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with that. So then with that in mind, right, can you take us through, like, what a typical week looks like for you? Starting with, like, hey, this is our training topic, how I'm going to build out this week, and then how we're going to set things up so that on the weekend when we go into those big matches, we're ready.
Yeah. So, from a club standpoint, I'm going to say, right, that we're supposed to follow a format. And each week, we've got a periodization that we know that we're supposed to be training the players on. But we don't have to stick to that. I haven't stuck to it every single week. So the way I prep for my, my next week or this week coming up is, I may take the film session or the experience from the previous match, and I will look at that and see and think about what we need to focus on for the next match. How many goal scoring opportunities did we have? How many goals did we get scored on us? Where did those goals get scored on us at? Were they in the center of the field at the 18? Those types of questions I look at first. And if I felt like we did great, that week, and, there's nothing we need to work on, then I'm going to think, okay, well, what can we work on as a team that we need to get better at? Maybe we won the match, but, how well did we build the ball from the back? Those types of questions. And then once I do that, once I realize what the team needs to focus on for this week, and I may also consider what team we're playing if I know the opposition and if I've seen them play and where their players are their star players. And that types of things help me determine, what lineup we need to have, who needs to start where, and those types of questions. And then we just gear the training session, towards that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of reflection, right? And I think you were just talking about great coaches and taking that extra time and effort. It sounds like a lot of what you do with your training sessions is taking that extra time to reflect and say, hey, this is what we did. This is what I would like for us to be able to do. And how do I bridge the gap between the two?
For sure.
Which, crucial, very important.
Right.
Not just, for winning games, but for, like, individual development
right.
for players, and kind of keeping you also mentioned the club's periodization, and along with the club, we also have, like, pillars and goals, and one of them is that next goal mentality. And I think that's right in line with that. Like, even if we win, right, what could we do better? So it's like, hey, we just scored, but what's the next goal?
That's right.
Right? What's the next step? And I think that's good for players because what I've read in the past, right, like Olympic athletes are at the highest risk of developing anxiety and depression after the Olympics are over because they get to the goal and then they don't know what to do next.
Right.
And it sounds like you're kind of setting yourself up and your players always have that, like, climbing the ladder, so to speak.
That's right.
And so that's great that, like, from the base, you're starting with that as your training session.
Yeah.
So then coaching philosophy, training, right, motivation, all of that is important, and all of that kind of revolves around the team culture. So then for you, how do you set team culture?
Yeah, so culture and environment, they are very important, to the success of any team. And how do you do that? I think that doing stuff inside and outside of soccer, a prime example, last Thursday or Thursday before end of training, just to build a little camaraderie, we played dodgeball, and the kids, they loved it, and the thing for this team in particular, this is right in line with the question. We had two U12 teams that we combined into one, basically. So we took two different teams who had played together and combined them, and now they're having to play again, with players who they're not used to playing with. So you see a lot of clinginess and little groups that players are buddy with the players that they're used to. Well, you got to think about that, right? Going into the training session for that week and the culture, right? You got to think about that. How can I mix these players up with players who they're not really trying to relate with, or they're not trying to pair up with? So you can control that, right? You can pair them up with those players, or put them with those players whenever you're doing team small team stuff. But that's important, and also really getting the parents and everybody all together, right, and building that culture, not just with the players, but with the parents, the whole group. And if you can do that, right, you look over at this is one way I look at a game, and I see how the other team might be successful versus us, or vice versa. At the beginning of the match, I'll look over at the parents. How far are our parents spread out on the sideline versus the other team? You see a team where their parents are all sitting beside each other, they're going to be a tight knit, and the team is usually a reflection of that. And my team right now is a prime example. You'll see them scattered out, and it's thinking to myself, what can I do? How can we, get that rapport together to help build that culture? So.
Yeah. I mean that's a lot, because that is interesting with two teams, and so you're basically dealing with two distinct cultures that were already formed, and then trying to find the way, because building a culture of itself is already difficult enough without having to say, hey, we've got to mesh this. And you mentioned parents, and I agree with you. I think parents, especially for youth athletes, are a huge part of getting them to buy into the culture and buy into the program. So how do you go about setting up your communication with parents so that you, first off, set yourself up for success, but also give them the feeling that they're actually part of it? Because I know sometimes parents feel like, oh, look, coach is just giving me the generic communication, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be challenging, it can be challenging. But, it starts from day one, right? You have that team meeting, you talk about expectations, you introduce yourself, you introduce everybody, you have an icebreaker, right? And then along the way, you should try, at this level, to incorporate them in, different things. You might do a weekend sometime where you do a picnic and you invite the whole team and all the parents and all that stuff. So, hanging out when you can outside of soccer can always be helpful, but it's not always doable. But, those types of things can help the overall picture.
Yeah. And I'm going to kind of shift focus here, because I think we kind of covered all of that real well, like the philosophy, the training, right, the team culture, and how we're building and connecting all of those. And so just a little bit of getting to pick your brain now, outside of just you as a coach, but just you as a person, right? So if you could bring any professional player into a Hammerheads practice for one day, who are you picking?
If I could bring a professional, well, to be honest with you, just because, that will be tough, but I would have to say I'd probably bring in Pulisic, just because he's an American, right? The players might relate to him more than they would some other players. I think his journey, I know a little bit about his story. I know some people may not think he's the greatest player, but regardless, that's who I would bring in. I'd bring in Pulisic. And what? I'm sorry. What was the question regarding to which
that was
player?
Basically, who you would bring in and why? And I think you nailed that.
Yeah, he just his journey as a player, from the youth and growing up, and what he, giving up everything. Right. I think it would be helpful to have that and be able to explain to the players, really what the sacrifice is. To get to that level, what are you sacrificing?
Yeah.
You sacrifice a lot, right? So that's the picture that I would obviously I would have them discuss just normal everyday stuff, and I'm sure they would get a kick out of that.
And I think he's a great one too, because he's one that could definitely help us dive in, and feel free at the back end of this to kind of jump in with your 2 cents, but his journey's been very publicized, which is great. and it's terrible.
Yeah.
When he does fantastic, America's like, chanting his name.
Yeah.
But every time he stumbles or doesn't do as well as he's expected to, there's a lot of people there that are like, blah, we knew that he wasn't going to be this.
Yeah.
And then so for him, that's got to weigh a lot, right?
Oh, for sure.
So that's a lesson, and I think that would be a great translation because we get a lot of players at this level in this age group and in this area that, like, they'll have a great game and they feel great, and then they have a bad game and it's like all confidence is lost.
Right.
So then how do we handle that situation and get them so that they have that kind of Pulisic mindset, we'll say, of even when they take that hit, the confidence doesn't drop?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. I mean,
yeah, he was a great pick, and I promise this was not predetermined. This was just right off the head.
yeah, no, I mean, I could have said, any other player that, somebody, the players would probably rather see, right? But are they, would they have the same information or be able to provide the players with the struggles and all that stuff? Because not all the players have dealt with the same stuff. You know what I mean? Some of them obviously younger, like Lamine Yamal. I don't think that would be the right player to bring to our club to say, hey, talk to the players about, because he's still young.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to learn. But Pulisic, I feel like would be a good choice.
And I feel like he really, really, really did a good job on that one. That was a nice pick out of the bush. Along the same lines, right? So then we were talking about with the confidence and being able to keep that. We have in coaching in the Shark Tank, we have a thing that we call the shark mentality, where we attack challenges instead of stepping back from them. So how do you kind of coach that shark mentality so that your players are excited and engaging with the challenge instead of being intimidated by it?
Yeah, the two things I preach at every one of my training sessions is I tell the players it's got to be game-like and it's got to be competitive. Without those two things, the training session, I don't feel like they'll get everything out of it. I would say, what was the question geared to? Sorry, I went off track
Just
a little bit.
Getting
How
players,
the shark,
the shark mentality.
I explained to them, right, those two things, game-like and competition. And once they hear that, right, it reminds them that, hey, this has got to be game-like and it's got to be competitive. So how do I do that? So I remind them during the training session, right, when things get a little bit off track. We take a break at whatever point we, have a water break. I remind them, hey guys, two things we got to do in training: competitiveness, right? And they'll tell me. I'll have them raise their hand. They'll tell me, and they always know what it is. So as soon as they hear that, right, it's just one of those things. It's kind of like you make a mistake out there and you blow the whistle, and everybody knows at that point they got to do one push-up, right? So it's like when they hear that, they hear, remember game-like and competitiveness. That's a reminder that they pick up the intensity, so to speak. So.
Yeah, and I'm totally right in line with that, and that's something I think that we all should strive to do across any sport is make our trainings game-like and make them competitive and allow kids that opportunity. And I think you're right. I think that really does help them get into the mindset that, like, the challenge is the fun part.
Yeah.
I don't know, for me personally, coming up through soccer, that was always the fun part, right? It wasn't the games where you go, like, I played for a high school where we didn't lose a conference game all 4 years. Those weren't the fun games.
Right.
When we go to Bishop, England, and we lose 2-1 or we win 2-1, those are the fun games, right? It's seeking out that challenge. So,
yeah.
And I think that started because coming up, like you're preaching here, is that competitiveness and the game-like and making everything just as soccer as we can be.
Yeah.
So then across everything that we've talked about, throw it all out in the window, something that you would give a new coach, right? A piece of advice that we haven't talked about.
Sure. Advice that I would give a new coach. I would tell a new coach to treat coaching as if it's something that they really, really love to do, right? I think that coaching, right, because every day is different. You don't know what to expect, the players, mindset, and you've got to always remain positive. So I would say, always go in there with a positive attitude, right? Because you could have a bad day. And newer coaches may not think about this because, at the end of the day, depending on what your job is, you may come in here and take that out on the players, not really realizing, because it does rub off on you. So just remembering that each time you go to practice, and thinking when you go to practice, right, this should be fun, right? For me, at the end of the day, when I get done with my normal job and I come to this is like my eyes light up, right? I'm the happiest I've been all day because, it's about, getting these players what they need. It's not about me. It's about catering to their needs. And, the environment we create, once again, it starts with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It start with us, and just being as positive as possible. So always remain positive.
Yeah, and the coincidence here is palpable to me. My objective coming in this week was reset soccer to fun, right? And making sure, like, even though these boys I've got are 13, getting them back to, do we enjoy being out here, right? And making sure that we start building practice around that ideology.
Right.
And I'll tell you, the effort that I got on this week, phenomenal.
Right.
Heads and tails above everything else.
I heard them over there today. Today they were getting it, and they were having fun.
Every aspect, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I got 90 minutes of just pure, unadulterated, as hard as we can go, everything we've got. Let's go out and have fun.
Good. Well, next week when it doesn't happen, just stay positive.
And that'll be the test, all right? Next week, if it's not the same, I gotta. All right. Well, we gotta keep it going anyway. This has been awesome, though, Coach. Before we wrap up, I want to hit you with one last question. Mm-hmm. If you had to summarize your coaching identity in just one word, what would it be and why?
One word. That's tough, man. I would say, maybe this isn't the right word, but maybe I'd say ingenuity.
Ingenuity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if that means what I think it does, right? You can't always expect things to go perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to be flexible, maybe that's a better word, flexible, right? Because your training sessions, your games, no matter what, right? You can't always plan as much as you want to plan. You want to be perfect or whatever. It doesn't always go perfect. So you got to be flexible, right? So I would say flexible.
Okay.
Ingenuity sounds good, but we'll go with flexible.
And I mean, in all honesty, they're synonymous there. They're ingenuity and flexible, right? So I think it's a good descriptor. I think it's a good way to end all of this. I love that. Because we actually talked back in the summer when we had the club training, and they made us go through it and pick ours, and that was one that I did not hear from anybody else that I think is quite unique, and I think if we're being honest, it really does suit you.
Right.
The times that I get to look over and watch your trainings, ingenuity does come to mind, right? It fits in there. So thanks again for joining us in Coaching in the Shark Tank. It's been great diving into your coaching philosophy and getting a look at what drives your passion for the game.
Yeah, man. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. For those listening, remember, the best coaches don't just build players, they build people. I'm Coach Metter, and I'm signing off the Shark Tank. Stay sharp, stay hungry, and we'll catch you next time.
Appreciate it.